This time we're going to cover everything you need to know about the sandbag lunge for HYROX. It's going to be the penultimate station of every race, and it's one of the most difficult and most challenging ones. What we're going to cover in this video is the standard, the technique, and also some race strategy and training tools you will need to do as good as possible with your next race. Let's start with the standards. You will have to cover 100 meters of sandbag walking lunges during each HYROX race. When you do a doubles race, this can be shared anyhow. If you do an individual race, you have to do it all by yourself. There are 3 different sandbag weights depending on the different divisions. Here we have a 10 kilo sandbag, a 20 kilo sandbag, and a 30 kilo sandbag. You should refer to the official HYROX rulebook to see which weight is the right for you. Next, we're going to have a look at the actual movement standards of the sandbag walking lunge. The first thing is, the sandbag always needs to be placed across the shoulders. So you can't just have it on one side or the other. It needs to be behind your head and covering both of your shoulders. Then you will need to start by standing tall with your knees and hips in full extension, the sandbag across your shoulders, and then standing behind the line before you can start your first repetition. You can decide which leg you want to initiate the lunge with, but then it's always important that the knee of the trailing leg is always touching the floor and that you alternate legs every single repetition. The sandbag needs to remain on your shoulders throughout the whole sandbag lunge segment. When you put the sandbag down, you will be assigned a 5-meter penalty. If you put it down one more time, you will be disqualified from the race. Something that is specific for the doubles races for the sandbag lunge is that the non-working partner has to walk behind the working partner. And as you get in the way of someone else, you will be assigned a penalty as well. This will be a 10-meter penalty instead of a 5-meter penalty. There's also a rule how you transition the sandbag between partners. It always needs to happen to the side, to the back, but it's not allowed to pass the sandbag to the front. Okay guys, now that you know the standards, we're going to talk about the technique for the sandbag lunges. The first thing we're going to discuss is how to properly pick up the sandbag from the ground. When you take a look at the sandbag, you usually have 2 center handles and 2 handles on the outside. We usually prefer using the center handles as it gets you the sandbag a bit closer to your center of gravity and allows you to pull it really in. But if you struggle with mobility or are usually a wider framed athlete, then we would recommend using the outside. The first technique for picking up the sandbag is doing a clean and jerk. That's what Nachi is going to demonstrate. So once you have it on your back, you want to pull your elbows down, so you pull the sandbag tight into you, and that's basically how you pick it up with the clean and jerk. Now for the second technique, we would go in one fluid motion from the bottom all the way to the top, which would basically resemble like a snatch or a power snatch. So that's the next thing Nachi's going to demonstrate. So here you need to build a bit more speed off the floor, so you have enough momentum of the sandbag clearing your head basically. And you can do a little dip at the top, so you duck under the sandbag. You can do one more rep. Okay, and relax. The first and final technique is one of our favorites, and it takes into consideration how the sandbags are aligned at the HYROX race. Because usually when you approach a sandbag, you will have the 3 different weights, but at an angle towards you. So as you approach the lunge station, that's how you would usually find your sandbag. And with the last technique, we would swing and then rotate. You would be able to pick up the sandbag exactly like this without wasting any time. So this is what Nachi is going to demonstrate now. And relax. One more time. So here you want to go for the rotation, swing it between your legs to generate momentum, and then use the power of the hips to get it to your shoulder. All right, now that you know how to pick up the sandbag, we're going to talk about the actual technique of the lunge. So Nazarena is going to pick up the sandbag now. And what we're looking for when we're in the bottom position is a stable front foot. So you always want contact with your heel and the ground, and you always want to have your knee slightly in front or at least above your ankle in this particular position. Then your torso has a very slight forward lean, and you're still pulling that sandbag tight into you to have like a good and stable position with the sandbag across your shoulders. Another thing that we're looking for when we're coming out of the bottom of the lunge is that our knees and hips extend simultaneously. It's a common fault that the knee extends before the hip is extending, and that's something we want to avoid intentionally. Later on in the video, we will give you some tips and tricks on how to train this particularly, especially if this is a result of weak quads and not just a technique problem. So Nachi is going to demonstrate 3 walking lunges now, and pay close attention to how she extends knees and hips simultaneously. So strong front foot, sandbag pulling in, nice. As you can see, she's maintaining a tight core. With a slight forward lean, she's gonna press up with that front leg and simultaneously extending the hip to use the quads and the glutes of the opposite leg simultaneously. Based on the speed you want to go with the lunges and the amount of stability you can present, there are 2 different techniques that vary in terms of how fast they are, but also how much stability they provide during the actual lunge. So the first would be a touchdown with the opposite leg to regain stability before starting the next repetition. That's what Nachi is going to demonstrate now for 4 reps. So as you can see, between the repetitions, she's bringing down her foot to regain stability. For the second technique, we're going to step through. So we're going to eliminate touching down at the top and then just go directly into the next lunge. As this technique is faster, it also has higher stability requirements. So imagine you're very tired at the end of the race in this penultimate station of the HYROX. So use this with caution, but we would recommend that you try it out in training first to see if this is something you can maintain, or if you actually want to switch back and forth between the techniques with the different levels of fatigue you will experience. As you can see, Nachi was doing a very good job of still reaching hip extension and knee extension at the top. This is a requirement, as we discussed earlier during the standards, that you always stand tall between reps. And when doing this style of the sandbag lunge, it's very easy to miss the extension at the top, and you might risk getting a penalty. And this is something you certainly want to avoid. So when it comes to the common faults for the sandbag lunge, we've already discussed the strength issue, where your knee might extend before your hip, and you're working a lot harder than you should. Another thing that often happens with technique are stutter steps that happen between the lunges. And this is something we want to avoid at all costs, because as we told you earlier, whenever you get a penalty, you have to have 5 meters extra at the end of the race. So now we're just going to show what you should not do. Pick up the sandbag, and then just imagine you're very tired at the end of the race. This is something you want to avoid at all costs. So especially if you have a very high heart rate and the musculature of your lower body is very fatigued after all of the running you've already done, this is something a lot of athletes are susceptible to. So it will take a conscious effort of trying to avoid it so you don't get penalized. Now that you know the movement standards and how to do the lunges, let's talk about race strategy. As we've said many times throughout this video, the lunge is going to come up at a very late stage during each HYROX race. And that might change your strategy depending on your lower body capacity or local muscular endurance. What we would recommend, especially as you get tired, is that you take strategic breaks throughout your lunges just to allow your quads and glutes to recover a bit. You also don't want to completely fry your lower body during the portion of the lunges, because you will have another run and the wall balls coming right behind. So this requires a sensible approach. So what we would recommend here is maybe taking 10 steps and then a short break. 10 steps and a short break. So you always allow to alleviate your muscles to let go of the stress or the tension, some new blood flow coming in, and then removing metabolites and clearing some of the fatigue, so you will be able to then continue. How to train for the sandbag lunges specifically. Keep in mind that lunges, due to the eccentric loading they present to the lower body, especially the glutes and the quads, have the highest demand on your lower body and these particular muscle groups, so they can get you really, really sore. So when building volume and intensity with lunges, this is something you want to be careful with, and just do it in a slow, progressive manner, and just do a little bit more every week. And then as you get closer and closer towards your race, you want to train the lunges in a more specific manner, meaning you want to combine it with other HYROX stations and, most importantly, with running. So you want to do maybe multiple rounds of 400-meter run, 20-meter lunge, 400-meter run, rest. As you train your lunges, there are certain accessory movements that you can do on top or after your training sessions, let's say once a week, to train the specific muscle groups and the specific mechanics needed in order to become better and more enduring at lunging. Now finally, let's discuss 3 accessory exercises you can do to improve at the lunges specifically. And the first one is going to target or isolate the quadriceps, so the knee extensor muscles that is on the front of your legs, and we want to strengthen these in order to be able to simultaneously push up with our legs and hips out of the bottom of the lunge. So here we usually like to use a sandboard, which is something you will find in most gyms, but you could also use something else to just elevate your heels. We would like to load it with a small kettlebell, but you can also start without a weight. What you want to do here is you want to have your hips slightly narrower than hip width, so a quite narrow stance, and then you want to trail with your knees as far forward as possible. So you can demonstrate a couple of reps here. As you can see, we reach a very deep knee flexion. You can continue. We reach a very deep knee flexion, so we're isolating the front of our thigh muscles. This is something you would want to do for 15 to 20 reps for 3 to 4 sets, and you want to keep the reps relatively quick so you maintain constant tension on your quadriceps. So the next exercise is going to be a bit more specific for the lunge, but we also want to isolate the front of the thigh a bit more. So what we're going to do here is we're going to elevate the front foot to put more pressure on the front leg. And then we're also going to load it with 2 dumbbells. This could also be a kettlebell or a barbell. And then we're going to do a split squat. So here you're going to do multiple reps with one side before you do multiple reps with the other side. And we would recommend using a rep range of 6 to 10 repetitions and also 3 to 4 sets. And you could progress over time with either the weight or also the range of motion by elevating the surface you put your foot on just slightly from week to week or session to session. So we chose the version with 2 dumbbells, and we're going to put the dumbbells on the shoulders into the front rack position to vary the loading a bit more and emphasize the front leg a little bit more. So what you want to do here is, same as with the cyclist squats, get the front knee as far forward as possible and go as deep into the position as you can, so you really target and isolate that quadriceps muscle. Okay, and relax. All right, now you have all the tools and information needed to improve the lunges for your next HYROX race. And also we have a HYROX program that not only gets you better at the specific aspects of the lunge, but also all the other stations that make up a HYROX race. You will find the sign-up link down in the description below.